huge thanks to OK Jazzy. They're your go-to for the 2026 World Cup and an incredible retro archive. They've got decades of iconic league classics, from legendary 90s designs to the rarest club heritage kits. Whether it's a high-performance player version or a timeless vintage look, prices start at just £15, 4.5 Trustpilot rating and fast shipping. Use code Chris for 8% off and grab your piece of football history now.
Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League predictions. This is match week 2. Of course, it was dramatic. It was entertaining during match week 1. Of course, we all love the Premier League here after a very, very busy summer with the World Cup. Now, my name is Chris Cowling and today I'm joined by Gareth McGuinness. We will be giving our Premier League predictions for match week 2. Please do get involved if you're watching or listening on YouTube and on X. Now, Gareth, how are you?
All good, Chris. Looking forward to week 2. I'm hoping from a Spurs perspective it's going to be a much happier week 1, but I don't think it can get much worse. So, no, listen, there's been a wee bit more activity this week in the transfer market, and you can see now, basically the football's going to take centre stage now over the next sort of couple of days, but you can see already Monday and Tuesday is going to be extremely busy in this transfer market. It seems to be really moving now by every hour there's a big story breaking. So there's a lot of knock-on effects, and I think whilst the football's exciting, I think there's a lot of teams with one eye on fans, especially with one eye on this transfer market as it sort of draws their close.
Absolutely right. Of course, it closes on the 1st of September. So, yeah, all eyes on the transfer market. And Roberto De Zerbi said it is a crazy market right now, and it really is. A lot of money is being spent yet again. Now, Gareth, before we get into talking about match week 2 and the fixtures, of course, one game takes place on Friday evening, 4 on Saturday, 4 on Sunday, and 1 on Monday night. Give us a short review of match week 1. Who were you impressed by? And I know Spurs were awful against Brentford. Of course, we won 5-1 against Charlton in the Carabao Cup midweek. And Spurs certainly need to do a lot better against Newcastle this coming weekend, which we'll talk about. But Hull City, of course, had a really good win against Manchester United. I think a lot of people were surprised by that. A very entertaining game. Newcastle against Liverpool. That one ended 2-2. City coming from behind to win 2-1 at the Etihad. Enzo Maresca's first game as City boss. Brighton smashing Villa 4-0. Chelsea winning 3-2 away at Fulham. And, of course, Everton beating Crystal Palace 2-0 at home. Ipswich winning at home. Leeds winning away at Forest. And as I mentioned, Brentford beating Spurs 3-0. What's your review of match week 1?
It's funny, isn't it? Because you look at it and go, who are the big winners and the big losers? Well, in terms of scorelines, Spurs and Villa had the worst weekends. But if you actually look, since the weekend, they've probably been the 2 busiest clubs in the transfer market. So maybe their fans will go, maybe it was good that we got off to a bad start because it's hurried things up a wee bit. Villa seem to be really busy now. They're selling players, seems to be now really about getting players in. So, there's obviously been quite a bit of news since the weekend around Villa. So their fans will probably look at that and think, well, maybe that 4-0 defeat long term might be good because we were really underprepared for that Brighton game. But like with Spurs have signed 2 players since the Brentford game, 2 big signings from a team like Man City, and already we've seen in that Charlton game, how much of a lift Savio gave not just the team but the fans. So I think there's a lot of excitement around Spurs going on. I don't sense there's negativity around Spurs going into the weekend. Yes, there was a bit of disappointment around the Brentford game, but I don't think people are not expecting big things against Newcastle. And Villa, it's too early to write them off. Villa fans, remember, didn't score a goal in the first 4 or 5 games last year, bottom 3, and went on to finish in the top 4. So, it's far from panic stations. But I always think for the promoted teams, it's important to get off to a good start. And I think we had this last year too. On the opening weekend, 2 of the 3 teams had won. And then on the second week, we had 2 teams playing each other, and the third promoted team had won. So I think last year by the second game week, all 3 promoted teams had at least 3 points, and of course Coventry play Hull this week. So Coventry have an opportunity to potentially join Hull and Ipswich in terms of one of their first 2 games. And I always think that's important for the promoted teams. Of course, no, Hull was a huge, return to the Premier League, beating Man United. Ipswich, which we actually says, we spoke. It's actually quite. I don't want to speak about them, Sunderland, but I don't know whether Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville were watching the podcast last week, Chris, but they kind of agree with myself on that Sunderland could potentially struggle. So that's obviously something that's became big this week, that people are looking at Sunderland and think, potentially vulnerable. European football haven't really strengthened. All the stats last year told you that they overachieved. So that's an interesting one. Man City, of course, big response. After that Community Shield 2 late goals, but let's be honest, they deserved to win the game. And the big game of the weekend was Newcastle Liverpool, and it was entertaining, wasn't it? And I think we've seen an insight into what Liverpool's going to be like. I think very similar to Ange Postecoglou's Spurs, that they're probably going to have to score three or four goals most weeks. They won games. How much will the fans enjoy that? I think at the start, because we've seen that with, obviously we're getting results too, but a lot of fans, including myself, were behind Ange because the football was really good in terms it was entertaining compared to Jose and Conte. And we seen last year a lot of Liverpool fans complained about Arne Slot's style of play, but ultimately you have to get results. So whilst the football will be appreciated, if Iriola's teams are losing more games than winning, then the fans won't enjoy that either. So I just thought it was fascinating, some of the analysis that Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville did on Liverpool. And I do think, Chris, I know we're big, we really enjoyed Iriola last year. We spoke about Bournemouth quite a lot, but I do think Liverpool are probably going to be the team to watch in terms of, I think a lot of their games are going to be very basketballish and high-scoring games. So all in all, I think it was a successful return for the Premier League. I think there were some big stories.
What was the most entertaining game, would you say, of match week 1?
I would say Newcastle Liverpool. I know there was 5 goals in Fulham and Charlton, but we haven't spoken about Chelsea. It was obviously a great start for them, and Alonso's seen enough in one match. They go and get a new goalkeeper. That tells you everything about how serious he's taking this season. He knows. We've spoken about Spurs, Chris, about one game a week. I think Alonso realizes as well that Chelsea have an opportunity, and after one game, Sanchez, more mistakes, he was going to get a proper goalkeeper. So I think that strengthens Chelsea too. But definitely the Super Sunday game, I think Isak going back to St James's Park added to the atmosphere. They kind of violated him. Isak had a really tough afternoon. It was uncomfortable for him. But you know what? It was great to see because, Newcastle...
I take the penalty, Gareth, at the end.
I actually spoke to a Liverpool fan, and I says, I think they made the right decision not giving him the penalty because he's such a poor game. And I actually did say to you, Chris, I do think it was going to be very similar to Sol Campbell going back to White Hart Lane because of the fallout around the Isak deal and the kind of negativity around Newcastle since Isak's departure. So, there was, even when he was shooting and missing, they were celebrating like a goal, and it was very hostile. And listen, it was great to see because Isak let the club down. Newcastle took an opportunity on him with his injury problems that nobody else would at the time, and his exit was really, really nasty. So look, I really enjoyed it. I was just disappointed Liverpool got that late penalty because I do think Newcastle deserved their day. They deserved to get all 3 points, and also as well, which shouldn't go unnoticed, it was a special tribute to Kevin Keegan as well. An unbelievable football man. So I just think all in all it was a really special game, and Liverpool and Newcastle games tend to produce great games and late goals, and we had all that, didn't we?
Just a quick one, Gareth. Do you think the transfer window should be open when the season does start? Because as you mentioned there, earlier about, the transfer market is absolutely crazy. It's open to the 1st of September. So, most teams, certainly in the Premier League would have had a League Cup game and 2 Premier League games. So certain managers will be panicking and boards and saying, well, we need X, Y, and Z, and they're trying to scramble around. Or do you think it should close the day before the season actually starts?
I think about 5 years ago, they changed it, that it closed the day before the season started. But the big issue that they had was that all the other European leagues didn't follow suit. And because leagues were starting at different times as well, the likes of the Spanish window, the French window, the German window all closed at the end of August. And I can't remember who, I think it might have been Eden Hazard that might have left for Real Madrid. I think he ended up going at the very end of the window, and Chelsea were forced into selling him because of the money that was on offer, and the player refused to go, and they haven't really got a tailor-made replacement. So I think the only way it works, Chris, is if all the big European leagues agree to the same date. But I mean, everyone's going to do their own thing, so I just can't see it ever happening that way. And I do think there is certain clubs that do like doing their business later on in the window because they think that potentially they can get better value. I don't know. I think that you would imagine the other way around. It would be, the later you leave it, the more expensive things become. But we have heard a lot of football agents and journalists. I remember Sky Sports doing a transfer show involving agents, and he says that you wouldn't believe how many opportunities come up in the last sort of 24 or 48 hours, just purely based on money opportunities and greed, and teams may be panicking. So, agents be working doubly hard in those last few days because they know, the window doesn't open again to January. So it makes for real excitement, doesn't it, towards the end of the window. So I always think no matter when the deadline is, you'll always see lit moves and you'll always see controversy towards the end.
Right, Gareth, let's get into it. Match week 2. And like I said, can't wait to get into this and really enjoy doing these shows, talking about the Premier League. So the first game of match week 2 is on Friday evening. Crystal Palace take on Manchester City at Selhurst Park. Now, Crystal Palace have won just 2 of their last 22 Premier League games against Manchester City, drawing 5 and losing 15, and are winless in 9 against them since a 2-0 away win back in October 2021. And Manchester City are unbeaten in their last 11 Premier League away games against Crystal Palace, winning 8, drawing 3 since a 2-1 loss in April 2015. And Crystal Palace are without a win in their last 8 Premier League games, drawing 3 and losing 5 since returning to the top flight in the 2013-14 season. Only in Feb last season, 9, March 23, 12, and April 2016-14 have the Eagles endured longer winless runs in the competition. How do you see this one going?
It's funny how this has kind of turned around. There was at one point that Palace were a bit of a bogey team for Man City. I remember Andros Townsend scoring an absolute screamer at the Etihad, and I remember Wilfred Zaha giving City trouble in the past. But in the last 3-4 maybe seasons, it's become very difficult for Palace to get results against Man City, as it is for a lot of teams. I don't know. It was a difficult start last week for Palace. They were well beaten at Everton. And I don't know whether there'll be a bit of a hangover from, they know that they had a very, very good manager with Oliver Glasner. Still some uncertainty around Ismail Assar. He could potentially move in the next couple of days. There's obviously, I know we've said for the last sort of few summers, Chris, that these number 6s and number 8s tend to be hot properly, but I think in the final few days of the window, a lot of clubs are looking to strengthen their attack and wide options. And it seems to be that there's so many wide players being linked with moves. And of course, Ismail Assar, 29, I think, this season. So this is potentially his last chance to get a big move. So I wonder, we're hearing that Liverpool potentially are snuffing around and the player would be keen on the move. So I do think there's a few questions at Crystal Palace at the minute. I think the one player that they'll really want to keep is going to be Adam Wharton. He's their star player now, really, moving forward. But I do think it could be a potentially difficult season for Palace. More European football this year in terms of it's a level up too, isn't it? From one in the Conference League, they're now in the Europa League, so you're going to be up against better opposition. Transfer-wise, business, I haven't really seen a lot that's went, it's took me eye. So I think Palace could be in for a potentially more quieter season than our ones. Man City, I thought it was really important, no matter what they did last weekend, that they just got a result after that Arsenal game, and they left it very late. But as it says, they deserved to win that match based on chances and the game. but can they follow it up here at Palace? It's their first home game of the season. Whilst we says that Palace, they have a wee bit to prove, they do tend to be a lot more competitive at home. And Friday night under the lights at Selhurst is never an easy place to go. So I do think it'll be tight, but Man City, you would imagine, just by the odd goal.
What do you think it's going to be like under Enzo Maresca? Because, that Pep Guardiola period was so successful, so many trophies, brought so much success to the Etihad and those Manchester City fans. What do you think it's going to be like under Maresca? Because the amount of change there, Gareth. I know.
Yeah.
We're sitting here as two Spurs fans talking about change. We'll talk about us soon. With the level of change that we've had, but a lot of change at Manchester City. A lot of players coming in and going out.
I could only go off my personal experience of watching football and Premier League football in my lifetime, and the four managers that you think about longevity are Sir Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, Jurgen Klopp, and Pep Guardiola. I know Jose Mourinho's been in and out at Chelsea a couple of times, but in terms of longevity, I'm talking, being at a club for, 10 seasons or close to it and beyond. Every one of those other teams has struggled post their managers leaving. You look at United since Ferguson's left, Arsene Wenger. It took a long time for Arsenal to get back to challenging. Only really doing that last year in terms of winning. It was a hard couple of years at the start for Arteta. Before that, Unai Emery didn't work out. And you think about Arne Slot, despite winning the Premier League, he was hounded out of Liverpool last year. So it's been very difficult for teams that have lost big influential figures as managers to be able to just go again as if nothing else has changed. So I do think that whilst those clubs have all had bits of a success post them big managers, they've never been able to continuously just roll on season after season. So based on that, I think it's going to be very difficult for Maresca to compete with what Pep Guardiola did. Does that mean Man City are going to turn into a bad team or become, an easy touch? Absolutely not. You would still expect them to be up near the top of the league and challenging. But everyone will look at Man City that wee bit differently now. Pep's no longer there. And, whatever you think about Maresca, whether you think he's potentially a top manager or that he's not good, he's not Pep Guardiola. And that's just what teams will see. And that's what fans see. So,
is he a top manager?
I think he's got potential to be a top manager. I don't think he's ready. I thought at Chelsea we seen signs of a really good coach, but maybe a bit too much too soon. I think this is an even bigger job at Man City. I know Chelsea, you don't get much time, but there wasn't a lot to compete with at Chelsea in terms of the last few managers hadn't been that much successful either. Whereas at Pep Guardiola, you're always going to be judged against Pep now, and I think that'll be difficult for him. Also, as well, he could look at it and go, has he got the squad of a Pep Guardiola team that he had in the past? There's obviously a lot of talk now about Man City over the next few days. They brought on a teenager from Monaco. I think he's the most expensive teenager ever bought. Around about 100 million euros they spent on him as Rodri's replacement. They're obviously bringing in a player from Brazil. They replaced Marmoush or Savio, I think from Palmeiras for about 60 million. And the one that's really galling piss now is Enzo Fernandez. And of course, he's got that connection with Maresca from Chelsea, talking roughly around 120 to 140 million for him. That is mega money. So Man City could look very different by the time the transfer window closes in terms of there's 3 players that are potentially coming in. So you'll just have to sit and watch with Man City and see how that goes. My one concern with Fernandez is his attitude. At Man City, Pep quickly stamped out anyone that had a poor attitude. You think about Raheem Sterling, Kyle Walker. I watched the documentary. As soon as Kyle Walker started misbehaving, he was shipped off to AC Milan. So Raheem Sterling, it had broke down. Leroy Sané's another one. And the biggest one, I think he was Man City's player of the season. The year before was João Cancelo, and Pep got rid of him. So he never allowed anyone to dominate the dressing room. And that's what Enzo Maresca kind of allowed at Chelsea. There was too many players having a say. So I don't know if we know Fernandez is a quality player, but I just don't know if he's the right player to bring into that dressing room at Man City.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself, actually. Score prediction, Gareth. I'm going to go 1-1.
I'm going to go 1-0 Man City.
Okay, so you think they'll get off to a flying start, winning 2 out of 2. Right, next up is the lunchtime kickoff on Saturday. Liverpool host Nottingham Forest at Anfield, 12:30. Now, some interesting facts here. Since Nottingham Forest's return to the Premier League back in 2022, no side has won more league games against Liverpool, and that is 3. That is why they're called the Tricky Trees. Now, Liverpool have won their first home league game in 12 of their last 13 Premier League campaigns, drawing the other 1-1 against Crystal Palace in the 22-23 season. Now, how do you think that Andoni Iraola will do at Liverpool? Do you think that we're going to see an entertaining Liverpool like we saw an entertaining Bournemouth? Is he literally going to take what he did at Bournemouth and take it to Liverpool, but go to that next level?
Well, obviously, I'm a big fan of Monday Night Football, as you know, and I watched Jamie Carragher analyse the Newcastle game for Liverpool, and he says to me it was the most attacking team he's ever seen in Premier League history. Now, I know we can all say things, and off the cuff, but Jamie Carragher does a lot of analysis and a lot of background, and watching him break it down, it was more attacking than Ange. It was crazy. It was 2 at the back. He had his fullbacks high and wide. He had his 3 midfielders bombing on, and as soon as they lost,
there's nothing wrong with that.
No. As soon as they lost the ball, it was 3 or 4 on 2, and I think the worry for Iraola is, as we've seen Ange try this at a big club, and whilst everybody wants their team to play attacking football, results do become, that is what you are judged on at top clubs. Whilst you'll get away with the odd defeat playing great football, if you're losing more than you're winning, it does become a problem. And I just wonder with Iraola if he is another manager that has only really got this one way of playing. You just can't see Iraola going defensive minded in any game, really. And Liverpool have went down because it was so boring under Slot. I think they went for the total opposite, a bit like what Spurs did with Ange. Now, whilst I have a lot of love for Iraola and how his teams play, I think it was a bit naive to go and do that at St James's Park. Newcastle, yes, they've had a difficult summer, but it's still a very difficult place to go. And you look at that Liverpool back 4, and I think it's one of the worst back 4s in the league. And I think Jamie Carragher referenced that the other night, that the 2 fullbacks are more like wing-backs. Defensively, they're vulnerable. They don't really like defending. So, you've got that problem. Van Dijk is no longer the Virgil van Dijk of 2 or 3 seasons ago. He's lost a bit of pace. His timing seems to be off just because of his pace. He's getting himself in more trouble. And then obviously with Konate moving on, he was poor last season. Liverpool have brought in the young centre-half Jackhead from France, so he needs to settle. And they brought in Araujo from Barcelona, who was out of favour. So I don't think there's much strength in that back 4 of Liverpool. Then you've got the issue in midfield that, Iraola has told Liverpool, from what we hear, that he wants to sign 2 white players. And one of them looks to be Barcola, who they've agreed a deal for. And then they're looking at another player now as well. And you just think of that midfield and you think, Gravenberch, he doesn't really want to play that role as a number 6. And then he played Szoboszlai, who's a fantastic footballer, and Florian Wirtz in the midfield. And both of those 2 players just want to bomb forward. So I think for Liverpool, there's going to be times where they're very, very vulnerable. And I think if they, and you look at that attack at the minute, with Mo Salah out of the team, they've lost players like over the years, like Sadio Mane, who was very prolific. I don't know if that Liverpool front 3 is as good as our front 3s that they had under Jurgen Klopp. I think obviously Isak's a great player, but there's problems with his injuries. He didn't look that great against Newcastle. I'm not sure we'll ever see the Isak of Liverpool of Newcastle at Liverpool. I'm really not sure about that. And then there's obviously a lot of talk about Cody Gakpo, but he looks the most reliable for goals in that team at the moment, and he could potentially move. So
let me stop you there, Gareth, because I just want to bring this stat in. Cody Gakpo had 9 shot involvements against Newcastle last weekend. 6 shots, 3 chances created, the most of any player on match week 1 in this season's Premier League.
Yeah.
Do you see him getting a move to either Tottenham, Manchester City, or elsewhere? Andoni Iraola, when asked about his situation, he said he can't guarantee whether Cody Gakpo will still be a Liverpool player come the end of the transfer window. Do you think he is on his way out?
Yeah, I think so, and it's purely based on what we've been saying this summer, that he doesn't fit the identity of an Iraola wide player. He hasn't got that piss and that blustering piss to get past players. So I do think if they do bring in Barcola and that RY player, it frees Cody Gakpo up. They move somewhere else, and the other player we haven't mentioned, Zekatiki, he's out until the new year. So
yeah.
I just don't know if Iraola's style of play is going to suit the players he's got at the minute. I do think Liverpool are going to be in this situation where it's going to be high scoring football matches, but I'm not sure if they're going to win more than they lose at the minute. I'm really unsure. I need to see. I think there's going to be a big few days in the window, but the fact that they're not going to sign any midfielders, he said that he's happy with his midfield. I think Jamie Carragher spoke like a very worried Liverpool fan on Monday night that he can see this team conceding far too many goals to compete at the top end of the league.
Gareth, just a quick word on Forest. They lost their first game under Oliver Glasner last week, 1-0. How do you think they'll do this season? Do you think that Glasner will turn them around and make them a force at some point?
It's a strange one for them because I've never seen it before. Nottingham Forest played Leeds on Saturday in the league at home, and then they played Leeds at home in the League Cup on Tuesday or Wednesday. So they played the same team back-to-back and lost both games. I think they lost the first game 1-0 and the second game 2-0. So it was a very disappointing start to the season. And Chris, we had this conversation, last week when we were on about Nottingham Forest, and I do worry for Glasner. I says if they get off to a poor start, we've seen before that Marinakis has got to achieve, he's got a trigger finger there he's not afraid to use. You know what? If they go to Liverpool and they get beat this weekend, and you have to, Liverpool are favourites for this game. There's no way of dressing that up. They are. It could be a potentially very difficult start to the season for Forest and the manager. And, if this was to continue on, that international break, you would think, oh my God, after 5 games, the manager, if he loses all 5 of them, I don't see him coming on. I think the transfer window closes, or the international break is on for 4 weeks. I can't see him reappearing for week 6. I really don't. That's just because of what we've seen with Marinakis. So I do think that Glasner needs results and results fast. I think it will be a mistake. But this manager's made mistakes before and he's fixed them with our managers. It was a mistake to get rid of Steve Cooper, but eventually they got it right with Nuno. It was a mistake to bring Angel, but eventually they got it right with Sean Dyche, and then they get rid of him, and then they brought on Glasner. So he don't mind sacking 2 or 3 managers if it means his 4th manager is a good one.
It's not just Marinakis though, Gareth, is it? That whoever gets time nowadays in the Premier League,
nobody's had as many managers as Forest in the last 2 or 3 seasons.
Well,
I don't think.
I said last week, didn't I? They're the new Watford of managers. Yeah. But I mean, time in the Premier League, it don't really exist anymore.
No, I think when Ange came on there, he spoke about a project. It's Nottingham Forest, and it was over in the space of 6 or 7 weeks. So you have to buy yourself time, and this is what I'm saying about Iraola. Whilst I think he's a very talented manager, he needs to get results at Liverpool. Playing good football just won't cut it. He's got to back that good football up with results. And I do think this is going to be a very entertaining game. Funny enough, Chris, a couple of stats for you. I was reading in this game that Forest have won the last 2 at Anfield, but Iraola's only beaten Oliver Glasner once out of 5 matches. So Glasner's had the upper hand in the Crystal Palace versus Bournemouth games. Mm-hmm. So psychologically, that could play into Nottingham Forest's hand this weekend, that they've had good success at Anfield in the last couple of seasons, and Glasner's had this good record over Iraola.
Well, I'm going for Iraola to win 2-0. What are you going to go for?
I'm going for a 2-2 draw.
Oh, wow. Okay. Just a quick one. Yes or no? Will Andoni Iraola be successful at Liverpool, and will he win a trophy?
I think long term, if he's given time, he will be successful. But I do think Liverpool need I think they're a summer short. I don't think they're going to compete at the top. I think it'll be Champions League football will be the height of where they can finish in the league positions. Could they win a cup? I think teams like that are always dangerous in cups. We've seen it with Ange and Spurs, teams that can score goals. And I think Liverpool will have days where they can win 4 or 5-0, and then they'll have other days where they're beat 2 or 3-0. So I do think, yes, potentially they'll be dangerous in the league and the FA Cup. I think Champions League will be a big stretch. I think they'll be found out.
Next up, Bournemouth v Everton, 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. What's going to be the ambition for these two clubs this year?
Well, it was interesting listening to David Moyes' press conference during the week. I think
he's grumpy.
I was going to ask about his team selection.
He's getting grumpier, Gareth.
Yeah, he is. I think he was asked about, and I can understand the reaction to the question, because I think the journalist could have phrased it better. He says, "Do you want to win the League Cup?" He says, "What manager doesn't want to win a cup?"
No. How important are the cups to you? And he's like, yeah. You've asked all this before. Of course, we all want to win the cups. Yeah.
But what I thought was a bit strange was he says that, well, do you not think it's more important to stay in the Premier League? I don't think Everton, I know they have been for a few years, but I don't really see them now as a relegation candidate. I do think they've improved a lot over the last couple of years since David Moyes has been in there. I know they had 2 or 3 seasons where they were very, very close to going down, but you don't really think that. If I think I could name 5 or 6 other teams I would fancy before Everton going down this year. So I thought that was quite strange for him to mention that, but maybe that is just the dampen expectations. And he's a master. He's doing this a long time. He knows what he's doing.
What do you see Everton as? Because if Everton fans are watching us talking about their club, Spurs, of course, finished 17th for the last 2 seasons. But where do you see Everton? When you think of Everton, because they've got such fantastic history. And when you go to somewhere like Goodison Park, I know they've moved from there now, but the stadium obviously is still there. Such great history. Everton, I was at a TalkSport event last week and they were being discussed and the pundits there said that they are, the underachievers of the Premier League. They should be doing so much more. But, what's the ambition this season for them?
I think it's probably been a difficult few seasons as well, seeing the likes of Spurs, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Crystal Palace, all winning trophies. That can't have been easy for Everton because they must be the next big club that's waiting an absolute eternity for a trophy now. All those teams have kind of got rid of that. So, that won't be easy. But the problem that Everton have is they never really took the domestic cup seriously enough. And they've not been able to get on the Europa Conference League or anything like that. So, they're going to have a wee bit more ambition. Now, I think if you're an Everton fan at the moment, the one worry is there is increasing traffic and rumours around this player, Iliman Ndiaye. And I do think when that player is being linked with such big clubs towards the end of a window, there's a good chance he's going somewhere. Now, we're hearing that the money on the table could be around 80 million. I think Everton's going to find that difficult to turn down. And if they were to lose him, Chris, he is their one real... I know they've brought on Brennan Johnson, but whenever I've watched Everton and whenever he's played against Spurs, and Jai's kind of got me off my seat, or I've taken a bit more interest when he's on the ball. Brennan's not really that type of player. Scored a good goal midweek against Preston, but from judging on the press conference, Jack Grealish seems like an option. They maybe replace him on him going back there unknown, or maybe even on a permanent deal. So there is a bit of a safety net in regards that they could potentially have a replacement ready lined up. But I think that will be a devastating blow for Everton if they were to lose him, because I do think he is that player that can do something special for them.
Is their recruitment good enough? Because how many podcasts have you and I been on where all of us have said about, when was the last world-class player that we signed? When was the last world-class?
Richarlison's been linked, doesn't he?
Everton signed. World-class I'm talking about.
Well, that's it. It's been a long time. I'm trying to think. The last big player to leave Everton or play maybe Lukaku, and he wouldn't be in that world class bracket, but he was a prolific striker at the time. You're going back a long time. John Stones, when he moved to Man City, probably wasn't world class then. He was potential to be a top class defender. You never would have imagined him to be so successful at Man City in terms of not what winning what he's won, but being a big part of that success. He's been there for a long, long time. A bit like Kyle Walker when he left Spurs for Man City, kind of established himself as the number one player in that position for a number of years. So it's been difficult, but I think Ndiaye moves in the next few days, and I think that'll be a difficult one for Everton to swallow. And I just think they're going to be stuck in that kind of rut of maybe not going to be dragged into a relegation battle, but you can't really see them finishing above maybe 10th or 11th.
Bournemouth won more Premier League games against Everton than they have versus against any other opponent, and that is 9. Gareth, I'm going to go for a 1-0 Bournemouth win here. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
1-1. I think you're sitting on the fence today. Right, another 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Coventry against Hull City. Of course, 2 of the 3 promoted sides. Coventry obviously lost 3-0 against Arsenal on the opening day, or the opening Friday night, the opening day of the Premier League campaign. Hull City beat Manchester United 2-0 at home. As I said earlier, I think that raised quite a few eyebrows in the Premier League. Coventry have won just 1 of their last 9 league games against Hull City, though, drawing 5 and losing 3, with both meetings between the sides in the Championship last season ending 0-0. So you might want to go for a draw on this one.
No, I've got a winner on this one. I think I've got a winner.
Go on then.
I think Coventry will get off their home start in the one. I think Hull got their one last week, and I do think that first home game for the promoted teams is always a big one. And I doubt you'll see the same kind of energy around Hull this weekend, because they were playing Man United at home opening day. I think it was big. Everybody probably exceeded expectations. I think going and playing Coventry away is probably a bigger challenge, because they have to get themselves up for this game now. They were riding high the last week. I think Coventry obviously had a difficult day at Arsenal, but it could have been worse. We didn't go to Arsenal and get embarrassed and be. You haven't heard anybody saying this week Coventry that are depth, they're beat 7 or 8-0. I think that was a win in itself, that Coventry didn't go there and get beat 6 or 7. And I think if they can get off their one start at home, it'll be a brilliant start for all 3 promoted teams, that they've all got off, like we said last year, all got off their one and start within the first fortnight of the Premier League. And I do think it's what's needed in the Premier League. I do not want to see 3 teams coming up every year and 3 teams going down. As much as I didn't enjoy sweating on the last day of last season with Spurs, it was good to see the likes of likes of teams like Premier League teams. If you're neutral, it was good to see the likes of Spurs and West Ham having to fight to stay up. It wasn't easy like it's been for the last few seasons, where if you look at the season before when Spurs finished 17th, they were an absolute mile clear of the team in 18th. You don't want that. You want all 20 teams to be semi-competitive in some way. So hopefully I'd like to see Coventry get 3 points in this game. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Coventry 1.
I'm going to go with last season, another 0-0 draw.
No.
Entertaining game, not.
What fence are you sitting on now?
Right, on Saturday evening, 5:30 p.m. kickoff, Tottenham Hotspur host Newcastle United. Of course, Spurs lost their opening game of the Premier League campaign 3-0 away at Brentford. A dreadful start, a dreadful performance from Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, but we are all expecting a lot more in this game against Newcastle. Newcastle, of course, they were part of a very entertaining game last Sunday, a 2-2 draw at St James's Park against Liverpool. Of course, Sandro Tonali will be facing his old club. Omar Mamouche hopefully he will be making his Premier League debut for Tottenham. And of course, Savio, who scored and assisted against Charlton on Wednesday. Tottenham Hotspur's starting 11 and our subs bench is starting to looking very exciting. Gareth, how are you feeling ahead of this game on Saturday night, Tottenham Hotspur v Newcastle?
I think there is a lot of excitement, but probably around this game more than there was in the Brentford game, just because I do think it's an hour week on as well, but it's at home. New players have arrived this week. We got a little bit of a look at Savio in midweek, and he looked pretty good. Albeit this is a different level, and because of how he performed, it's probably raised the expectations as well. So we have to factor that in. Marmouche has arrived, and I think 99% of the fan base is happy with that. I don't know if everyone is, but I'm guessing it's a pretty large number. We may see Mateus Fernandes and Tonali play together, which we haven't seen, in the Brentford game. So from the start, I do think there is potentially more excitement. We've got our captain potentially returning, and Van de Ven, Pedro Porro returning. And, it's the first home game of the Premier League season, and it's against a team that, in Newcastle that whilst they had a good result last week, I do think there is a little bit of negativity around them, and I do think we spoke about it at the start. That Newcastle were always going to be motivated for that Liverpool game at home. The Isak thing. This is a different. But like we said, with Hull have to get themselves up for going away to Coventry now. It was easy to get up for United. How much of an appetite will Newcastle have for this game compared to the game last week? So I do think it's a good opportunity for Spurs to get off to a one start at home, but it won't be easy. They've got to perform a lot better than they did last week. But I don't think it's possible for them to be as bad as that. I think we can only see improvement.
That's exactly what Roberto De Zerbi said in the press conference today, that Spurs, need to be a lot better than we were away at Brentford. I think a lot of fans, a lot of people were surprised and shocked by that performance and the result. And De Zerbi even said after the Brentford game, he was shocked by that level of performance. What did you put it down to? It might be a number of things, but what do you put it down to why that performance was so bad?
I think physically we weren't in good condition, and that was evident. It definitely didn't help that I think we played a team that were possibly in the best condition of all 20 teams in the league. Brentford looked to be starting the season really, really, in top condition. They went and put 6 past Birmingham in the League Cup, and whilst people say it's only Birmingham, not every team was hitting 5s and 6s during the week. We didn't read too much on the pre-season, but they did won the game 7-0 the week before they played Spurs. So they're on a really rich moment at the minute, so it was possibly just the wrong time to be playing Brentford. And obviously we were in very, very poor condition. I think the manager spoke about that. We've seen some reports this week, and we've seen some of the players speak about how difficult pre-season was, and so a bit of a hangover from pre-season, which is never good to see. And I think it's something the club are going to have to look at, moving forward, because if we put on our top performance against Newcastle, then last week becomes bad news. But if it takes 6 or 7 weeks for Spurs to get going here, then the pre-season is going to be a real letdown, because it could potentially cost the team 20 points between now and the end of the season. It's going to put a lot of pressure on them. In the final sort of 30 games, they make up for the bad start. So I do think it's an important game for Spurs to get on the board here. And at the minute, if we're not in top condition, we just have to find a way to get results. We can't just keep losing games and people to go, oh, well, until we get, you're just going to have to find a way to get through it. So do you expect us to be in better condition this week? Definitely. But I don't think it's going to be, a complete turnaround. I don't know how much you can do in the space of a week. But I thought it was interesting that some of the players were left out midweek. They work on their condition and different. So De Zerbi knows what they need. And it's probably their running power is letting them down more than anything. Because if you haven't got that running power and that fitness, then it doesn't really matter, because your quality is going to let you down. You need to be in good condition to play. So let's hope it's a team that's a lot more ready for a Premier League game on Saturday.
Gareth, do Pedro Porro and Mickey van der Ven start this game against Newcastle?
It's a difficult one. It really is difficult. I don't think Archie Gray's been great in the 2 games. I don't think he was poor. I don't think he was poor against Brentford. I didn't think he was good in the first half against. I thought his delivery was poor at times. And I just don't know if he's a right back. I know he's played there in his career, but I just don't know if he's got that. I don't know if he's got that ability to play in that position. So that is a conundrum for the manager. And, this is what we said, Chris. Only time will tell if it was the right decision to let certain players go. Because, Jed Spence would have been a good option for this game. If Pedro Porro's not, in a good enough condition to play, Jed Spence would have been a better option than Archie Gray. What I've seen of Pedro Porro the other night, he looked way off. I know he linked up with Savio a couple of times, but his crossing was really, really poor, and that's not like Pedro. And he didn't play that long against Charlton. If he had been in better condition, maybe he would have played longer. So I think it's a big stretch for him to go on. I think Van de Ven's a different one, because I do think at fullback there is more demands on you. In terms of there's a lot more running to do. And I think that the centre back pairing was so bad last week. I think it's going to be difficult for the manager to go with the same two. I think there's even a chance Danzo might come on if Van de Ven's not ready. I do think he has to do something different. Van Hekken and Senesi was just so bad last week that Danzo probably maybe has to come on if Van de Ven's not available. But I do think Van de Ven will play. I just think captain at home. I just think he'll almost force himself on playing him. So I think out of the two, Van de Ven's more likely than Porro.
Savio and Marmoush, are they going to be in the starting 11?
100%. I think the manager's even alluded to that they're going to play. So I don't see any way that they won't be in the team. I think it'll be Savio and Marmoush off the two flanks. I do think it'll go that way.
Right, Gareth, before we get your thoughts ahead of this game, Tottenham Hotspur have lost 6 of their last 8 Premier League games against Newcastle, winning 1, drawing 1, and haven't kept a clean sheet in any of their last 14 against the Magpies. Now, Newcastle have won more Premier League away games against Spurs than any other opponent, 13, winning 3 of their last 4 visits to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, losing 1. There has been at least 1 goal scored in all 62 Premier League meetings between Tottenham Hotspur and Newcastle, making it the most played fixture in the competition never to finish 0-0. And also, Tottenham Hotspur have won their opening home league game in each of their last 5 seasons by an aggregate score of 14-1. Gareth, we know that these games, historically, in the Premier League, there is always goals.
Yeah, no, I don't see it being a 0-0 draw. Absolutely not. It's going to be fascinating to see how Newcastle set up. I was listening to Alan Shearer today, and he thinks Newcastle are going to play on the counter-attack. And we've seen them do that against Liverpool last week, and they were devastating. We had Harvey Barnes and Elanga, and they've got a lot of pace in those wide areas.
Well, can I also add that their 2-2 draw at home against Liverpool, I think it's very fair to say that the home fans, the Newcastle fans, were surprised by that level of performance that they saw.
Yeah, and I do think that Isak story was always going to raise Newcastle's levels. I do think they were always going to put on a performance at home. I actually fancied that. When I've done the predictions last week, this is 2-1 Newcastle. I fancied Newcastle last week. And they were also doing 99th minute penalty, denied them that 3 points. So I just think it'll be a different Newcastle in this game. I do think they are going to play in a counter-attack, but St James's Park's always first game of the season. Newcastle were always going to be up for it. Interestingly, the striker's injured, William Masuda. That's a big loss for them. But I just think Spurs have got to get a 1 here. I think it could really be negative if we lose this game. I think there will be a lot of disappointment.
One thing that you and I have spoken at length during these shows is the fact that our home record, particularly last season, was so poor. We won against Burnley on the opening weekend. We won on the last weekend against Everton, and the other one was in the middle of the season in December against Brentford. And most of the home games, I just remember boos for Thomas Frank or Igor Tudor, and terrible scenes at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with everyone being so unhappy. This home record, particularly in the Premier League, has to improve, and it must start, in my opinion, on Saturday against Newcastle. A win is vital, and especially after that performance and result last weekend against Brentford. Gareth, what score prediction are you going for?
I'm going to go for 2-1 Spurs.
Yeah, I agree with you. 2-1 Spurs. I don't know whether it is us talking with our heads or our hearts.
Probably but I do think Savio and Marmoush are going to be potentially the difference here in this game. I do think that there's... I was a bit unsure with Savio, but I seen a player the other night that seems really motivated to change his opinion in English football. And with Marmoush, I think he's just never really got an opportunity at Man City to show. Look, if you ask Newcastle fans about Marmoush, they'll tell you a different story. It was a pain in their backside. So, listen, I do think that with these two players, it gives us a lot more excitement now going forward, and potentially, hopefully, for the the following, I can't remember now. After Newcastle, who's after Newcastle?
Forest away.
Forest away, yeah. After Forest away, we could potentially have even have another player in that attack. So I do think going forward now we might have a little bit more excitement watching this front three.
You're a typical football man. You are like a coach saying, not knowing the next game. It's just take one game at a time. I understand.
I usually do actually, but I couldn't. Yeah. I know we've got Forest. It's one of our only 3:00 games, I think, coming up. The Forest game.
Do you know? I'm glad you mentioned this. I almost forgot. Marmoush, his record against Newcastle playing for Manchester City. 5 games played, 7 goals scored, 3 in the Premier League, 2 in the FA Cup, 2 in the League Cup. So he loves to play against Newcastle, and this could be a great afternoon. Like it was a great day out for Savio midweek. And like you said earlier, Gareth, it gives everyone a huge lift when you get a new signing through the door and they hit the ground running, start very well, score in their debut. It was nearly 2, but it was assist for Ben Davies in the end. But yeah, great start from him. Let's hope that he's going to be exactly the same for Omar Mamouche, because it has been a really, really decent window for Tottenham so far. And Roberto De Zerbi hopes to get one more in before the transfer deadline day in just a couple of days' time. So yeah, Gareth, you're going to go for 2-1. I'm also going to go for 2-1. Right, Gareth, let's move on to the Sunday games, and we'll move through these pretty quickly. Chelsea against Brighton on Sunday, 2 p.m. kickoff. How do you think Chelsea would do this season? And Brighton have had the start of their lives.
Chelsea's one at the minute that you would be really taking notice of. Great start to the season away at Fulham. A lot of, football people were talking about that potential front three of Chelsea, was potentially being one of the best in the league. And we've seen it in action, didn't we? And Monday night, João Pedro, Morgan Rogers and Cole Palmer all scoring. That could potentially be devastating. You just think of the quality, and that's going to cause teams problems. And then the one area we've seen with Chelsea for a number of years now, it's been a major concern as a goalkeeper. And they fixed that now with Emi Martinez. 7.5 million. They've got him for that's a free transfer in this day and age.
Yeah, crazy.
That's a month's wages for somebody. That's where we're at. So they've got him for peanuts, and he's an instant upgrade on Sanchez. And you'd be sitting here now, and you would be lying to yourself if you don't think. I mean, Chelsea have got to be the team in the best position to challenge Arsenal now. Maybe defensively there's still a couple of question marks, but you think of that month. Enzo going would be, if Enzo was to go, that could potentially be a big one for them. We're hearing that they really want Alex Scott as a replacement, so that will be interesting, because I don't really think they're that similar of players. I think Scott's more box to box, more energetic. Enzo's probably a wee bit more technical, but Alex Scott's a fantastic player too. So be interesting to see what Chelsea look like when the window closes. But very good start from away at Fulham, and with 1 game a week, they're a very dangerous team in the league this year.
And what did you make of Brighton against Aston Villa?
Well, you couldn't help but be impressed. Probably the only disappointment for Brighton was they were 4-0 up after 30 minutes and didn't score again. But talk about starting the season. We had an absolute bang. Can they follow it up now? I mean, they got a great result in the Europa League or the Conference League playoff. They're through. So they've got a European group stage or league phase now to get through. But they will be looking at what Crystal Palace did last year and think, these Premier League, the 8th or 9th best team in the Premier League's a lot better than the 8th or 9th teams in our leagues. So Brighton will feel it, they have a great chance. They maybe do what Palace did last year. So I think Brighton, maybe if they take their foot off the gas a bit in the Premier League, I think it will be worth it to make sure that they go far in the Europa League, the Europa Conference League, because one of the European trophies, Chris, you can speak about it. We were there. It's really special. So, and the fact that Brighton and Palace are big rivals, that would have, seeing Palace do that last year, they'll want to follow it up and have that moment. So, difficult game away at Stamford Bridge, but Brighton have had a brilliant recent record against Chelsea over the last few seasons. So, it's not a complete gimme for Chelsea.
What we're going to go for, Gareth, before you actually give me your score prediction, having been unbeaten in their first 10 Premier League games against Brighton, winning 6 and drawing 4, Chelsea have now lost 5 of their last 8 against the Seagulls, winning 3. I think Chelsea will just edge this being at home. I'm going to go for a 1-0 Chelsea win, sadly.
I'm going for a few goals in this one. I'm going to go 3-2 Chelsea.
Okay. Next up, we've got Leeds United against Brentford. Of course, both teams started the season with a win. What can Leeds achieve this season, would you say?
It's been a brilliant start to the season for them. A one away at Forest and then one away at Forest again in the Cup. I think Leeds really need to be going out for a League Cup or an FA Cup. I really do. I think big club, haven't won, a trophy like that for a long time. And again, I don't really see them being in a relegation battle. I really don't.
You saying a team like Leeds should be going for a cup. I found it really interesting listening to Nathan Jones, the Charlton manager, after, of course, his team lost 5-1 against Tottenham. He said the League Cup game against Spurs was a complete distraction, and he was so negative about the competition and about the fact that he had to go to a Premier League team because he said, they can't compete. So where does it leave a team like Leeds? Can they compete and go for a trophy?
I think Charlton were perhaps a bit unlucky that Spurs don't tend to be in round 2 and they draw them away. It was always, whoever got Spurs and Chelsea was always going to find it difficult, and
yeah. What I mean though, Gareth, is Premier League survival is a lot more, like you mentioned earlier about David Moyes, a lot more on Premier League survival rather than saying, "Oh, we'll go for an FA Cup or I'll go for."
No, I get that, but I think Leeds need to be aiming higher now than just staying up. So it'll be interesting to see. It was a brilliant result away at Forest in the league, brilliant result away at Forest in the Cup. So, Leeds are a difficult opponent for anyone. I remember that game. Spurs played Leeds at the back end of last season, and that second half was very, very difficult, 45 minutes. I remember the week before they destroyed Man United at Old Trafford. Leeds are a very competitive team. So, I do think they'll give Brentford a better game than we did. But Brentford at the minute look really hot. So it's difficult to go against Brentford based on what we've seen. Beating Spurs 3-0, beating Birmingham 6-1. Leeds are winning games against Forest, but in more workmanlike fashion. Brentford at the minute are just completely destroying teams. So the fact it's at Ellen Road maybe gives Leeds a wee bit more of an opportunity here. So, I'm still going to go with Brentford, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm going to go for a 2-1 Brentford win, but I don't know whether you want to talk about it, Gareth. But Brentford were pretty decent. They were bang on it last week.
Yeah, and the midfield looked really, really good. And that player they signed, is it Singari, I think? He looked a real bargain. So no, I'm going to go the same scoreline as you, 2-1 Brentford.
Okay. Next up, Sunderland take on Fulham at Stadium of Light. Can Sunderland replicate what they did last year in the Premier League?
I told you Sunderland are going down.
Well, after match week 1, you might have changed your mind.
No, I'm only joking, just in case there's any Sunderland fans watching. Listen, I actually have a soft spot for Sunderland. I really enjoyed the Netflix documentary. I know Sunderland were struggling at the time, but I thought it was a really good insight on the football clubs and how it runs. And I always wanted to see them back in the Premier League. So I really hope I'm wrong. I just think it's going to be such a difficult season for them. I just think last year they really overachieved every metric. They were fortunate. And that was a bad result, losing to Ipswich in the first day of the season. And I just think I've looked at their European opponents today. There's some difficult games in there. They haven't really strengthened the squad. So I think it's going to be a difficult season, but I do think this is a must. I don't want to say must win at week 2, but I do think they need to get some sort of result here because Fulham or another team I think could have a difficult season. I'm not sure about them either. So I do think, I don't want to call it a 6-pointer, Chris, but this is a big game for both teams already.
I've written down 0-0.
I'm going to go 1-0 Sunderland.
Right, Manchester United take on Ipswich 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. Of course, Manchester United, a lot of people had or do have high hopes for them this season. Of course, they lost 2-0 away at Hull City last weekend. Ipswich, do they stay in the Premier League? What do Manchester United do, in your opinion, this season?
I was one of the people that actually predicted United. They have a tough time at Hull.
You did?
I just thought the first game of the season going there, 12:30 game, always going to be difficult. I didn't expect Man United to be as poor as they were now.
Yeah.
It was a very, I don't know if you watched the game, Chris, it was very comfortable for Hull. They never looked under any pressure at any time. It was, was as comfortable as you get, 2-0 victory.
I was driving to Brentford at that time. Yeah.
United never looked like scoring, and they had 72% possession. So that is going to be there was a lot of question marks at Middlesbrough that Carrick, when Middlesbrough played teams that they dominated possession, they didn't score enough goals and didn't create enough chances. They dominated possession, but struggled to break down low blocks in the Championship. And that is something that's been born in the last week, is that this can't be a theme at United either. So, look, Carrick's an ex-Spurs player, very likeable person. I really hope he does well at United. But there's no time in football. We says it, Chris. You says it. You have to get results. And if he loses the Ipswich and Hull in his first 2 weeks, he's under huge pressure. Make no mistake about it. He's under huge pressure. And we're only being two games on. If you had asked, United fans, what do you think about your first 2 games of the season? This is 6 points. And football doesn't go on paper, but they would have expected 6 points, and at the bare minimum 4, with the 2 points being dropped. Oh, the keeper had a great day, and no, but it wasn't like that against Hull. They were well beat, and if they don't beat Ipswich, I do think there's going to be a lot of negativity around Carrick. Is he good enough? That'll be the thing. Was he just an Solskjaer where he come in and he got a reaction to the players, but long term, is he going to be good enough? So I think it's a huge game. It's probably a bigger game for Michael Carrick than it is for Man United as a football club. I do think Carrick needs to get a result here. Ipswich, I did say in the early season predictions, I think they're the team out of the 3 that has the best chance of staying up. It was a brilliant result for them against Sunderland. And I think Tammy Abraham coming in is going to be a big signing for them. I think Premier League experience.
I agree.
I know Frank Lampard's, he's found it difficult, but I think Gary O'Neill's come into difficult situations before, and he's worked magic with Bournemouth and with Wolves. So he's used to walking into, expectations being high in terms of the odds being against you. And I do think he can keep Ipswich in the league. So this is not as straightforward as it looks on paper. I do think Ipswich can cause United some problems, but by hook or by crook, I do think United will get over the line in this game. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Man United 1.
I'm going 3-0 Man United. Right, the Monday night game, Aston Villa against Arsenal. Of course, Aston Villa fell to a 4-0 defeat away at Brighton, and Arsenal won very comfortably 3-0 at home against Coventry. Emery, a lot of changes again at Aston Villa, particularly after winning the Europa League. Arsenal, of course, won the league last season. How do you see this one going, Gareth? Because that was a tough day for Emery at Brighton. He's not used to losing like that.
No, he's not, but he won't panic because they did have a difficult start last year to the season. And they had I think they had a difficult window last year too, if I remember. They lost players, not as many as this one. This has been a really, they lose Martinez, Watkins, Rogers.
Yeah.
There's probably our players. They've Tielemans. They've lost a lot of players. Danye, thanks away to PSG as well. So they've been ripped apart. But the Unai Emery factor has always been, no matter how long this fixture goes on, this is still seen. I think Arsenal fans still get nervous about playing Unai Emery teams. And when you have people like Gabi Ekbonlahor in the media, where everything's going against Aston Villa, I do think a bit like this Newcastle-Liverpool game last week, Villa's first home game of the season, Bank Holiday Monday, under the lights against the champions, against Arsenal. There's going to be a little bit of a feeling that's us against the world. Everything's going against us. The rules are not fair. And I do think there is a lot of Aston Villa fans that agree with Gabi Ekbonlahor. But, I'm sure Gabi watches the podcast, Chris, when he has a minute. But, when you see the stuff that's coming out today that he was going to Paris to watch Jay-Z instead of giving Spurs the money, and it's very easy for people to just think of modern times, but there was a time when Spurs couldn't sign players because they built a stadium. Spurs just didn't suddenly walk into all this money. We're not Man City, we're not Chelsea. Spurs built a brand new stadium and went through years of not spending big money like Aston Villa are doing. We had to sell our best players, our Berbatovs,
18 days it was.
Yeah, we had to sell Berbatov, Modric, Robbie Keane, Gareth Bale. We've also lost Hart, and we've lost big players as well. It's not just this feeling that everybody's against Aston Villa and Spurs are getting it all so easy is rubbish, because, like you say, 518 days we had a player. White Hart Lane was smaller than Villa Park. We couldn't spend huge money. So Villa, in my opinion, should be looking at Spurs and emulating what Spurs have done from a business side. Of course, from a football side, Spurs have to do a lot better. But in terms of generating revenue, Villa need to go down that route of Spurs. So they really should be looking at Spurs as the masters of doing that, because we're generating that much revenue that even when we do have per footballing seasons, we still have the revenue to go and not be in any trouble breaking rules. So, I don't want, I've always liked Aston Villa as a football club. I'm not going to let Gabby Bonahor put me off them, but it was nice when he got a little bit of taste of his own medicine when Brighton absolutely destroyed them. So, but they are playing Arsenal this week, so I think I'll be happy if Gabby's happy this week. So, I do think this is going to be a lot tighter than people think. I don't know, Villa's on a bit of a downer, but I do think at home it'll be a bit like the Newcastle Liverpool game. The fans will get right behind them, and it'll be everybody's against Aston Villa mentality. And I do think that'll raise Villa's levels. So I do think this will be competitive.
Well, I think you'll be surprised by my score prediction. Before I give it to you, Aston Villa have won 4 of their 7 home games against Arsenal since their return to the Premier League in 2019, losing 3, more than they had in their first 24 against them at Villa Park in the competition, winning 3, drawing 9 and losing 12. Arsenal have won 15 Premier League games at Villa Park, more than they have at any other away venue in the competition. And Aston Villa have won their last 3 Premier League home games against the reigning champions, as many as they had in their first 28, winning 3, drawing 10 and losing 15. Gareth, you might be surprised. I'm going to go 1-1.
I'm going for a bank holiday cracker. I'm going for a 2-2 draw. Very entertaining.
Good. Wow. Right. Okay. Just very quickly, choose your game of the week. What's going to be the one worth watching?
I think Villa Arsenal. I think that could potentially be the one. Emery, Arsenal, the Aston Villa. Everybody's against them. Monday night, bank holiday. I do think that could potentially be the most entertaining.
I'm of course going to go for Tottenham Newcastle. I think that's going to be a cracker.
I hope so, but I hope Spurs come out the right end of it.
Yeah. Gareth, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to talk to you about the Premier League and all things Tottenham Hotspur. Have a great weekend, and we will see you again very soon. Gareth, before you go, tell everyone where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me under that handle there on X, and I do think I'm back here on Monday evening. They discuss the last sort of 24 hours going into the end of the transfer window, so it'll be our last transfer window Monday of the summer, and can't believe it's up already. But that's going to be a very, very interesting show, because I'm sure there will be a lot of stories going around over the weekend and on Monday evening. Yeah, absolutely. Gareth, thank you so much. Thanks as always. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. And yes, Gareth, we will see you Monday. But of course, we will be back with another edition of the Spurs Chat Podcast after, hopefully, Spurs have beaten Newcastle on Saturday evening. Have a great weekend. Come on, you Spurs.